I've been using the iPhone 15 over the past week, and while it isn't perfect, this is one of the biggest year-over-year upgrades that Apple has given to a base model iPhone in a very long time. When you first open up the box, the first thing that strikes you is just how soft it is. That's honestly the best way to describe it, especially if you've held an iPhone from the past few years. The edges have been ever so slightly rounded, and the back glass is this really soft matte texture that feels pleasant to hold. It's one of the nicest feeling phones that I've ever held actually, and I'm not exaggerating at all. The only thing I don't like about this design update is the color, or rather, the lack of color. Apple calls this green, and don't get me wrong, I like green, as you can clearly see, but this iPhone is the color of my white shoes after I mow the lawn, and that is not a good thing. Also in the box, you get a braided USB Type-C cable for our brand new USB-C iPhone 15. Thank you, Europe. If we flip the phone over to the front, you can see that we get the dynamic island from the iPhone 14 Pro last year, and this is actually a big upgrade for me. All of the notifications now pop up and expand from there with lots of little neat animations, and it also does have quite a bit of functionality attached to it with music playing and timers and whatnot. Yes, it might feel a little bit gimmicky at first, but there's one thing that this island allows for that makes the whole thing worth it for me: seamless custom icons. Because that shortcut pop-up now happens inside the dynamic island, you can have custom icons on the home screen without that annoying shortcut pop-up coming up. If you want a tutorial on how to do this, let me know in a comment down below. The display has also been upgraded. It now tops out at 1000 nits of brightness for SDR content and then 2000 nits of brightness with HDR, and it is noticeably brighter outside. I used it for navigation a ton on my trip this past weekend, and I never had a problem seeing the screen even in direct sunlight. The display is still running at 60 Hz though. The high refresh rate displays have once again been saved for the Pro model phones this year, but that's totally fine. This is a perfectly good display for most people. The colors and contrast are fantastic, and the stereo speakers are great as well. The biggest upgrade though, can you guess what it is? Well, you're thinking about that USB-C port, aren't you? Wrong. It's actually the camera system. The iPhone 15 gets the 48 megapixel main camera from the iPhone 14 Pro, which is actually huge. I took a ton of photos and videos on my little trip over the past weekend, and I was very impressed at the kind of images that you can get with this base model iPhone 15. The photos were sharp, had very accurate colors for the most part, and there was very minimal shutter lag present when pressing the capture button. Even in places where lighting wasn't the best, the iPhone 15 still did pretty great, and the cinematic mode from the front-facing camera looks very solid too. This aviation museum that I went to was incredible. There were a ton of planes from many different eras, and even when there wasn't a ton of light, the iPhone 15 performed admirably. There's some new software features too. For example, if I take a regular photo of something, I can actually choose to turn it into a portrait mode photo later on. The iPhone 15 will actually capture all of the depth information required in every single shot that you take, so that you can change things up on the fly after the fact. That is awesome, and it's something I think a lot of people will take advantage of. Apple has also given us a 2x option inside the camera app, despite the fact that there's no telephoto in this phone. Because the main sensor is now a much higher resolution, you can crop into it digitally without much of a loss. It's definitely a good option to have, but as you can see, if you zoom in any further there's a pretty big loss of detail. It's certainly no substitute for Apple's new 5x tetraprism telephoto lens that the Pro Max gets this year. The other two cameras on this phone, the 12 megapixel ultra-wide and the 12 megapixel front-facing camera, have not been updated, at least near as I can tell. But image processing as a whole is going to be better because the iPhone 15 comes with the A16 Bionic chip that was in the iPhone 14 Pro last year. And by this point, I think you're starting to see a bit of a trend. This is basically the iPhone 14 Pro plus or minus a few things. You get the dynamic island, the brighter screen, the main camera, and the A16 Bionic from last year's Pro phone. You are losing the 120 Hz part of the display and the telephoto camera, but you're gaining USB-C and the new design. Unfortunately, the USB-C port in the iPhone 15 and iPhone 15 Plus is limited to the exact same speeds as the Lightning port was, so USB 2 speeds. Transferring files via cable is still going to be a pain. Wired charging is also pretty slow. Apple claims that you're gonna get like 50% of your battery back after 30 minutes on the charger. And how is the old battery anyway? Well, Apple didn't talk a lot about it in the keynote, which led me to believe that it wasn't gonna be very good. And I wish I wasn't, but I was kinda right. If I have a busy day where I'm using the cameras a lot, or I'm using the phone for navigation a ton, I will definitely need to plug in and charge up before my day is over. MagSafe does make that a little bit easier with the plethora of MagSafe battery packs that are available now, but I still do wish that there was a bigger battery stuffed into here. The iPhone 15 is a big upgrade over last year's 14. I actually think it's the biggest upgrade since the iPhone 12, and they're keeping the price the same this year. It starts at $799 USD. If you skipped upgrading to the 14 last year because it was a bit of an iterative update, this actually might be the year for you to buy. I do have a review coming on the iPhone 15 Pro as well, so subscribe if you haven't already. Hope you liked the video. Thanks for watching, and as always, have a great day.